Welcome to this webinar on Dialogic Teaching. The aims of this session is for us to think about the types of dialogic talk, if any, that are already happening in our classrooms. Are we providing enough opportunity for good quality talk and discussions each day? And why is it important to provide these opportunities? Throughout this session, I will give you some ideas and strategies for supporting pupils in dialogic talk in order to build brain power and deepen their learning. Robin Alexander has conducted extensive studies on dialogic teaching, and you'll hear him referenced often throughout this session. One of his most influential quotes, which really sums up and sets the scene of this session, is, "While talk is essential for the intellectual and social development of all children, for some of them the talk which they engage in at school is nothing less than a lifeline." Throughout your career, you have probably come across a child or children within your class who this quote represents. Children who, academically, struggled in areas of the curriculum and struggled to put anything down on paper. However, were able to participate in dialogic activities and able to access text through discussions and really be able to become part of the class and groups with their peers. This would have created a lifeline for these pupils. It allowed them to interact with their peers and feel as if they belonged. Dialogic teaching is not a literacy subject. It is a pedagogy that should become a teaching style and learning style that is used throughout the curriculum. Teaching and learning in this manner allows all children to participate in learning and levels the playing field. Developing good dialogic skills can open the door for children as it builds ability to communicate with others for lifelong skills. The key message is we are looking at talking to learn and not learning to talk. Talk builds brain power and encourages children to think and articulate their thoughts, so extends their thinking. In 2016, Robin Alexander declared that his research showed the following: that teachers did most of the talking in classrooms. Talk rarely challenged children to think for themselves. Low-level cognitive demand in classroom questions, the continuing prevalence of closed questions, habitual and unthinking use of bland, all-purpose praise rather than feedback which assesses and informs, a seeming paradox of children working in groups but rarely as groups, and a tendency of classrooms to be places where children cope rather than engage. We should keep in mind as we reflect on his research that it is from 2016 and that isn't necessarily what is happening within your classroom currently. However, it gives us a good opportunity to reflect on what is happening within our classrooms and think, are we giving children enough opportunities to challenge their own thinking or each other's thinking? Are we planning the questions that we ask during discussions to stimulate the children and challenge their cognitive demand? Are we encouraging the children to think about the types of questions they are asking themselves and each other? Are they using higher order thinking skills? In Inverclyde, over the past few years, there has been a huge emphasis on visible learning, and we understand that what this research shows isn't necessarily what your head teacher would see if they went into your classes in terms of feedback and praise. However, if we're honest, in some cases and circumstances throughout the day or week, we can be guilty of some of the all-purpose praise. Children working in groups rather than as groups is vital. It's not enough to put children together and say they're working collaboratively. Children need to be taught the skills to work effectively as a group. They need to be taught how to communicate with one another in a respectful manner. Children coping rather than engaging is a huge one and comes back again to dialogic providing that lifeline. An effective dialogic classroom will engage all learners, which in turn minimises disruptive behaviour. So with Alexander's research in mind, let's take a moment for self-reflection. I'm going to ask you to reflect on your lessons from today or one day this week while being honest about the interactions that you have made. It will make for much better self-reflection of your teaching. On a piece of paper, note down what you did today in your class. I've given an example on Monday's timetable. In this example, I had done literacy, then numeracy, IDL, and finished with PE. On each subject, mark with T if the majority was teacher talk in that lesson. Mark with a P if the majority was pupil talk, and put a TP if the majority was interactional talk between pupils. You can pause this video to complete this task and then restart it again when you are ready. Once you've completed, you will now mark with an asterisk which, if any, you'd regard as purposeful talk. Consider these pointers when deciding if it was purposeful talk. Were the pupils on task and engaged at all times? Was there accountability? Could all pupils in the group answer the question? Were the pupils all in agreement? Did they challenge one another? Was there differing points of views within groups, and did they come to a conclusion? Again, you can pause this video now to complete this part of the task and restart when you are ready. Now look at your day that you have recorded. Do you have an asterisk on your page? If not, was there a missed opportunity there to engage pupils in purposeful talk? And if so, how would you go about ensuring that the next time you didn't miss that opportunity? To be able to ensure that we don't miss those opportunities, we have to really understand what dialogic teaching is. Dialogic teaching builds brain power as talking and thinking are intimately related. Language builds connections in the brain, especially during the early and pre-adolescent years. As we talk and engage thoughts with others, so do we learn to think for ourselves. Dialogic is the tool belt that everything else comes from. It's not a literacy subject, it's a pedagogy. You should now be starting to have a think about where you can make a difference to the talk in your classroom. It doesn't just have to be during language time. Talking and listening underpins everything we do in class and is the tool belt for success in all areas of the curriculum. In your class, it might lend itself well to your health and well-being topics or your social studies lessons. These are naturally where we tend to have more collaborative work and therefore is an ideal opportunity to focus on talking and listening skills for developing. There are 5 principles that underpin dialogic teaching. The first 3 are ones we would do all the time. Collective, when everyone is working together to address the learning tasks. Reciprocal, when they are learning from each other and take on different roles. For example, the role of the teacher, so they are having to articulate their thinking and lead discussions using higher order questioning and paraphrasing the discussions. Supportive, there is a respectful environment when children aren't afraid to voice their opinions or ideas. There is no fear of getting an answer wrong, as they all work together to help each other reach common understandings. The next 2 are ones that we may not do naturally and really need to take time to think about. Cumulative. Cumulative is arguably the hardest to achieve within a classroom, as it's not natural. We don't speak in this way naturally, so it has to be modelled by the teacher. This is built upon open-ended questions and responses between the teacher and students, which are designed to enhance problem posing and problem solving rather than simple explanation and recall. So for example, if a question is posed and answered, the teacher may model the cumulative approach by saying, "I agree with Jennifer because," and then offering their own ideas on the question. Likewise, the teacher could say, "I understand Jennifer's point, however, I don't agree because," and give her answers. It is important that children understand that it is okay to have differing views and they should be taught how to articulate that in a respectful way. And if the supportive principle is in place, the child who is being disagreed with will not feel undermined or upset, but will accept that there are different points of view. In fact, they may wish to come back with a counter-argument. Purposeful. This principle relates to the teachers must planning for quality dialogic teaching within their class. It won't happen by accident. You have to plan to integrate dialogic and quality questions within your lessons. It has to be well thought out and pre-planned. Remember, it's the how, not what, that is being taught. So bearing in mind those principles, how can we recognise dialogic teaching in our classes? The first point, dialogue is more than just talk. It involves teachers and learners building on each other's ideas, posing questions and constructing interpretations together. This is the cumulative principle in practice, with the building on being evident. The second point, dialogic teaching is as much about the teacher as the learner and relates to teaching across the curriculum. This is referring to the purposeful principle and how it is well planned out. The last point, a great dialogic teacher sees pupils as partners in the learning process, not just passive recipients of knowledge. This is referring to the reciprocal principle. So now that we've looked at the key principles of dialogic, we now need to think about how we're going to get there. Unless you are currently in a school that has dialogic embedded within it, you are not going to walk into a class tomorrow and immediately have your children participating in cumulative and purposeful talk. We have to lay the foundations and the building blocks to get there. And before children can talk, they have to be able to listen. Learning to listen is vital in developing the ability to play and interact with others successfully. It underpins the development of understanding language and talking. Listening skills are necessary to acquire all the speech sounds we need to use when talking. These foundation blocks need to be in place in order for children to successfully develop literacy skills. Children are often referred to speech and language therapy because of concerns over language or literacy. After assessment, it often becomes apparent that the real issue that needs to be addressed is their listening skills. Poor listening affects children's ability to learn across the whole curriculum. Poor listeners are more likely to be distractible, and they find it more difficult to play and interact with others. Children who have not learned to stay quiet and listen when other people are talking find it more difficult to take turns in conversations and negotiate with their peers. This can affect their ability to form successful social relationships. Research has shown that often in a classroom setting, it wasn't that children are unable to listen, but rather that they did not understand what good listening meant. Therefore, as educators, it is our job to teach children from a young age good listening skills. To do this, we can use whole body listening. This is Larry. He's Larry the listener. Larry helps us learn to listen, not just to hear what is being said, but to listen. Larry uses every part of his body to listen. He uses his eyes to listen by looking at the person who is talking, giving eye contact. He uses his mouth to listen by not talking over the person. He uses his hands to listen by keeping them still and not fidgeting. He uses his feet to listen by keeping them still. He uses his brain to listen by thinking about what is being said. And he uses his heart to listen by being respectful to the person who is speaking. This is a great way to get young children to understand how to listen. You can get this image poster from a web search. There is also a song that goes to Frère Jacques about good listening that can be found via a web search, and children love it. If you're in an upper stage class who still have poor listening skills, then you can think of ways to adapt Larry to suit them. A teacher in St. Joseph's told us last year how she was using Mr. Potato Head from Toy Story instead of using Larry with her Primary 5 class, and how well they responded to it. You may have seen in classes children using hand gestures with their discussions. A closed fist would be I'm thinking. Thumbs up, I'm ready to speak. Open palms pointing to someone, I'm passing the discussion over to you. These gestures may seem quite gimmicky and do not have to be used, but young children do like them and it helps keep them focused. In the Files section of the Literacy channel within the CMO training team, there is a video of a Primary 1 class in St Michael's using their talking and listening rules, which you can watch later. In this video, the children are using the hand gestures effectively. If you are currently in an infant class, this may be a good idea to watch to see what you are aiming for with good listening skills. Larry the Listener is a great place to start in infant classes, but we may need something a little more mature as we move further up the school. Before beginning to introduce good quality talking and listening into your class, it is a good idea to introduce the concept of the Y chart to pupils. Lots of teachers and schools across Inverclyde already use dialogic teaching in their classrooms, so you may find that your pupils are already familiar with this concept, and that's great. Even if they tell you they did a Y chart with their teacher from last year, it is best practice to do this every year at the start of term, as it helps to set the standards for a good discussion in your class. You will begin by asking the pupils to think about the 3 elements of the Y chart in relation to having good discussion. So what will a good discussion look like to people within the group and someone looking from the outside? Children will note down their responses on their own Y charts in their groups. They will give responses like, "It looks like everyone is working hard," or "people working together." Those pupils who have done it in the past might know that answers like "positive body language" and "good eye contact" are what we're looking for. We then ask the children to think about what it feels like to be part of a good discussion, and they may give answers like "safe," "included," "productive," "feels like I'm being listened to." And finally, we ask them what a good discussion will sound like to them and to other people listening in. They may give answers like classroom voices, praise, encouraging language, productive. Some of the answers will appear in more than one section, and that is fine. A good exercise to do to get the children to really think about this is to let them have a discussion where there are no rules or restrictions first. Give them something really juicy to discuss in their groups that will really enthuse them. For example, girls are rubbish at football. Be confident when you do this and let the chaos take over for 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, bring them back and ask them about their discussions, and this should help stimulate a really good discussion on what makes for a positive group discussion. Be careful that the chaos doesn't go too far. That's why it's best to do it for a short allocated time, like 5 minutes. There are a few ways to develop the Y chart in your classes. One way would be to already have the answers written on little flashcards and get the pupils in their groups to work out where each answer goes. This is the type of activity you could do with younger classes. This would eliminate silly answers for the children. With younger pupils, you could also do this as a whole class lesson with a Y chart on the board. In Primary 1 and 2, it might be best to just focus on the whole body listening with Larry before attempting a Y chart. Classes further up the school could work in trios or groups of 4 to come up with their own ideas. One way to organise it is to give each group a large piece of paper and have them work together to fill in the sections. At the end, collect the answers on the board, group them into similar words and phrases, then produce one completed chart for the wall which has everyone's ideas on it. The whole point of the Y chart is that pupils can take ownership of this and are therefore accountable to it when they are having group discussions within the class. Thinking about the supportive principle, we use the Y chart to really highlight how we should feel safe and supported when sharing our views and thoughts, and constantly going over the Y chart on a regular basis will really help to build that sense of a supportive community in your class. Once good listening skills have been established, it is time to teach the talk. Teacher modelling is essential here. It is important that if we want children to do something new or different to what they already know, that we show them how to do it first. This is exactly the case for teaching them how to build on each other's thoughts and answers. That's the cumulative talk. We can model this by building on the answers that pupils give during whole class discussions. A really effective way to do this is also to use the fishbowl technique, where you would sit with a small group of children and model this during a conversation with the rest of the class watching on. They could give you feedback on your discussion, providing that you share the success criteria beforehand so that they know what they are looking for. It is very important to also teach the children the proper vocabulary for building on from one another. Again, this vocabulary needs to be modelled by the teacher. The use of scaffolding techniques like vocabulary walls, word mats, sentence stem cards, etc. are useful and will be explained further later on. Dialogic teaching is not easy and it doesn't happen instantly unless you are in a school where it has been well embedded within classes for years. It takes time and a lot of hard work and dedication from yourself and the children, but it is worth it as it will have a positive knock-on effect in all other areas of your teaching. When children are working on a task together, they work best in mixed ability trios or groups of 4, but no more than 4. They should be encouraged to face one another with positive body language and be able to give each other eye contact. What does dialogic talk sound like? It sounds like children sharing a common goal or purpose. That's the collective part of the principle of dialogic. The children have that common goal of discussing something or working on a task together. They want to be able to achieve that goal, having that sense of teamwork and building community in their groups. Children allow each other to speak, having that mutual respect for one another. This can take time to establish with certain children who are used to dominating a conversation and taking over the group. Your co-constructed Y chart should help with this. Children ask questions in order to understand better, being able to ask each other to elaborate on what they have said, asking those probing questions to one another. Children paraphrase or reflect back each other's words. This is part of the cumulative talk. This needs to be modelled by you as the teacher before children can do this effectively with each other. Children are prepared to express uncertainty or tentativeness. This is about children having that confidence to disagree with what someone else is saying or to consider an alternative viewpoint. Children try to make their own point as clearly as possible. As pupils work together, they should be able to help one another to articulate what they are trying to say. You as the teacher should help model this and scaffold this for those children who need it. Children explore differences of opinion. Children should be able to listen to other people's points of view and consider what they are saying and explore their logic. Some pupils are all too quick to shoot down other people's points of view, so it again goes back to what is in your Y chart. Children give arguments to support their ideas, being able to back up their answers and articulate their thinking. What does a dialogic classroom look like? Children will be engaged in purposeful talk that is structured, the pupils stay on task, they are achieving the success criteria. Teachers are modelling think-alouds. A think-aloud is basically what it says. The teacher verbalises out loud what he or she is thinking. This is a very powerful tool to use in many areas of your teaching. It really gives the pupils the opportunity to see what your thought process is like, and then they should be able to copy this thinking. Scaffolding. This is when you put mechanisms in place for children to learn. Things like using question starters, question fans, having the Y chart on the wall with vocabulary you want the pupils to use. You might also have heard of the I do, we do, you do concept of scaffolding. This is where you as the teacher would model how to do something, the I do part, then you and the class would work together through an example together, the we do part, and then the you do part is when children do it independently. Authentic questions that are purposeful and meaningful and will encourage pupils to think deeper. And children will be exploring concepts and developing as a community of inquiry by working together to explore their thinking and to develop that cumulative talk by building on each other's ideas. Teachers ask a lot of questions. Studies show that many teachers ask more than 300 questions a day. Most of the questions teachers ask are closed in the sense of only requiring one answer. For example, what colour is that? Where is that from? Questions are open when they have more than one possible right answer. Open questions are more complex and demand more than one-word answers and more thought. A lot of those 300 questions are actually questions we don't even want to know the answer to. Questions like, why are you doing that? Why didn't you go to the toilet at playtime? Where is your homework? We ask these questions every day, but half of the time we either don't wait for an answer or don't want an answer in the first place. Think about the type of questions you ask in the class during the day. How many of them are closed questions? How many of them are open questions? And how many require deep thinking? As mentioned, we spend a lot of time each day asking unnecessary questions rather than focusing on making the most of our questioning and ask good quality questions to promote high order thinking. Take some time tomorrow to think about the type of questions you are asking on a day-to-day basis. What can you do to improve those questions? Asking questions lies at the heart of good teaching and learning and plays an essential role in sustaining creative dialogue. Through the skillful use of questions, we can challenge children's thinking, develop their awareness of their own learning, and enable them to ask their own questions and create their own agendas for research. I'm sure you're all familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, which you can see on the screen. It takes you through the different levels of high-order questioning and thinking, with the remembering level at the bottom being the easiest to achieve, and the further you move up the pyramid, the more difficult these questions and thinking become. Poor questions limit children's thinking and opportunities for dialogue. Questions that are closed or too narrow are often the guess what the teacher is thinking type of question. When too easy, they lead to a kind of verbal tennis match, batting questions and answers back and forth. This is not creative dialogue. There is a place for these type of quick, closed, fact-finding questions, for example when assessing knowledge in a particular subject, or quick-fire mental math questions. But there needs to be a balance between the closed, quick-fix questions and open questions that really challenge children's thinking. A good question, whether closed or open, should pose an intellectual challenge, provoking what Piaget called the cognitive conflict, which can help to challenge children's thinking. When cognitive challenge is put into the context of dialogue, children's own questions, as well as those of the teacher, help move thinking to a more advanced level of development, helping to scaffold new levels of learning. Look at the screen and you will see how it is very easy to move from that traditional teacher-pupil interaction of a closed question into more thought-provoking, probing questions. As a teacher, this is the point where we would model this level of questioning for the pupils with the goal that pupils will do this in their own interactions in the future. In many situations, it is important that we don't accept the first answer that a child gives and then moves on, even if it is correct. We should be encouraging the pupils to really think about their answers, justify them, and give reasons to allow that deeper level of thinking. It is usual to begin questioning with easy, literal, do you know type questions, then to lead on to increasingly challenging open-ended questions, a method called Socratic, named after the Greek philosopher Socrates, whose way of teaching was to help the learner reach a conclusion through response to a sequence of challenging and increasingly abstract questions. Questions become Socratic when they are genuine invitations to inquiry. For example, what do you think type questions. Socratic questions urge pupils to probe or dig deep and to think clearly. A Socratic sequence of questions begins with a simple, literal question, such as, "What is a butterfly?" through more analytical questions such as, "How does a butterfly differ from a bird?" and on to more abstract or conceptual questions such as, "So what defines an insect?" This technique is clearly demonstrated in the video by James Nottingham, which you should take a few moments to watch after this presentation. It highlights everything I've just spoken about when he asks a question, "What is a tourist?" You will find the link to this video in the CMO training team within the Literacy channel. Research suggests that teachers on average wait only 1 second after asking a question before either rephrasing the question or seeking an answer from another pupil. Increasing this thinking time to 5 seconds can result in improved responses, such as children giving longer answers, being more willing to offer an answer, being willing to ask more questions, or responding in more thoughtful and creative ways. It might feel like a long time to wait, but it really does make the difference to the type of answers that you get from the pupils and allows more pupils to take part rather than the children who are always ready to answer first. The positive effects of dialogic teaching are widely recognised. These are a few of them. Increase pupil engagement and focus. When given something thought-provoking and interesting to discuss, pupils will become much more engaged and will be enthusiastic. Having the Y chart will ensure that pupils are more focused on what they're discussing. Extended and in-depth analysis and discussion. Building on that cumulative part of dialogic teaching, extending the answers and thoughts that the pupils give. There's a decrease in off-task behaviour. Again, this goes back to having the Y chart and children having respect for the rules that they came up with together. It is also linked to that engagement, giving them something really interesting to talk about and discuss. It builds self-confidence. This is particularly important for those pupils who aren't as confident in their academic abilities. Their self-esteem and self-confidence improves with dialogic as they get that sense of worth within the group. They don't have to worry about writing things down or completing really hard sums. All they have to do is be able to talk. And this goes back to that quote we read earlier about it being a lifeline for some pupils. There is an increased understanding of concepts. Having that opportunity to talk about things with their peers and learn from each other helps to affirm what they have been learning. There is an increased ownership of and excitement for learning. Again, this goes back to that pupil engagement. Let the children lead the learning. Ask them what big issues and topics they would like to investigate and discuss. Think of topical things in the news or in social media that can really engage the children. Dialogic skills need to be taught and built on week by week. Time put aside in your timetable to teach the skills of talk is a good idea. Remember, this is not a literacy topic. It can be used throughout the whole curriculum. Be creative. A good starting point is to introduce Larry the listener in primaries 1 and 2, and from primary 3 upwards, a good starting point would be to co-construct your Y chart and display it in your class. Begin talking and listening lessons with the success criteria specified on the skills within your Y chart. In the middle to upper schools, you could use a record sheet to keep notes and evaluate the talking and listening skills and being able to identify what worked and next steps. Use good debate topics to get the children excited about talk. A copy of a record sheet that has been used in classes can be found in the file section within the teams. These books can be used as a resource for dialogic teaching and can be found in most Inverclyde schools. These books provide stories followed by a series of questions which are split into 2 types of questions. One set is very comprehension and recall based, and the other promotes a deeper level of thinking surrounding the theme of the story. Always remember these key messages. Dialogic teaching is not a literacy subject. It can and should be a pedagogy that is used throughout all areas of the curriculum. This is not an initiative that's currently in fashion. It is based on years of research and is proven to raise attainment across the curriculum. We refer to it as the tool belt. If you have dialogic teaching embedded within your class, then it will make all other approaches more effective. Here are some supporting materials and links to further reading if you'd like to develop your knowledge on dialogic teaching further. Thank you for joining me for this webinar for Dialogic Teaching. This QR code will take you to a forms page to provide feedback. Thank you.